The massive Devourer construct writhed in space like a wounded animal, its perfect crystalline structure continuing to transform into something organic and chaotic. Streams of energy that had once flowed in perfect patterns now pulsed erratically, creating feedback loops that spread to the other constructs in the system. Admiral Chun watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The quantum consciousness weapons were doing more than just damaging the enemy, they were fundamentally changing what the Devourers were. But she knew this was only the beginning. Admiral, Lieutenant Rodriguez called from communications. We're receiving priority transmissions from the Galactic Council. Chancellor Vextai is demanding an immediate status report. Tell the Chancellor we're busy, Chun replied, never taking her eyes off the battle. Commander Jackson, what's the status of our Special Forces teams? Jackson consulted his tactical board. All boarding parties report ready for deployment. Captain Martinez has the assault shuttles prepped and waiting. Chun nodded. This was the part of the plan she had shared with no one, not even the Galactic Council. While every other species had tried to fight the Devourers from a distance, humans were about to do something characteristically insane board the enemy constructs. Ma'am, Ensign Kim announced from sensors, the central construct's energy patterns are stabilizing. It's adapting to our quantum weapons. Expected, Chun said. Dr. Patel, how long before they develop full immunity? Based on current adaptation rates, perhaps 20 minutes, came the scientist's voice from the laboratory. The consciousness patterns we introduced are being analyzed and filtered out. 20 minutes. That was all the time they had to execute the most dangerous part of their plan. Launch all assault shuttles, Chun commanded. Execute Operation Prometheus. Across the human fleet, small shuttles ejected from the larger ships like angry wasps from disturbed nests. Unlike the sleek, energy-efficient craft preferred by other species, the human shuttles were armored blocks of military functionality, designed to survive in environments that would kill normal vessels. Captain Elena Martinez gripped the controls of the lead shuttle, her knuckles white as she guided her craft toward the writhing mass of the central Devourer construct. Behind her, 12 Special Forces operatives checked their equipment one final time. Remember, Martinez spoke into her com, we're not trying to destroy this thing from the inside. We're trying to give it nightmares. The specialist seated directly behind her, Sergeant First Class David Kim, adjusted the strange device strapped to his chest. Ma'am, are we sure these consciousness transmitters will work at close range? We're about to find out, Martinez replied as the shuttle approached the construct's surface. If Dr. Patel's theories are correct, direct neural interface should overwhelm their adaptive filters. The surface of the Devourer construct was unlike anything in known space. It appeared to be made of crystallized energy, constantly shifting between solid matter and pure light. As the human shuttles approached, defensive systems activated, but these weren't the coherent energy weapons they had used at long range. The construct was trying to maintain its structural integrity while fighting off the chaos introduced by the quantum weapons. Breaching. Charges ready, announced Corporal Santos from the shuttle's rear compartment. Target area shows minimal defensive activity. The shuttles struck the construct's surface like meteors, their reinforced hulls designed to punch through enemy armor. Explosive charges detonated in perfect sequence, creating entry points in the alien structure. Within seconds, the human assault teams were inside. Martinez found herself in a corridor that defied description. The walls curved in directions that shouldn't exist, made of material that was simultaneously crystal, metal, and energy. Gravity pulled in multiple directions at once, and the air itself hummed with power that made her teeth ache. Teams Alpha through Delta. Report status, she commanded. Alpha team inside, came Sergeant Kim's voice. This place is ... wrong, my head feels like it's splitting. Delta team secured, reported another voice. The consciousness transmitter readings are off the charts. Whatever these things use for brains, it's everywhere. That had been Dr. Patel's breakthrough discovery. The Devourer constructs weren't ships with crew, they were singular entities, living beings of crystallized thought and energy. Their consciousness was distributed throughout their entire structure, making them incredibly difficult to kill, but also vulnerable to the right kind of psychological warfare. "Activate transmitters," Martinez ordered. "Give them a taste of human dreams." Across the construct, the Special Forces teams activated their consciousness transmitters. The devices had been developed by studying human brain patterns during extreme stress combat veterans experiencing flashbacks, soldiers fighting impossible odds, anyone who had faced death and chosen to keep fighting. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Devourer constructs. Screams echoed across multiple dimensions, as it was suddenly flooded with distinctly human experiences. Fear that transformed into rage. Desperation that became determination. The absolute refusal to surrender that had carried humanity through countless wars. "My God," whispered Dr. Patel over the CUM system. "The quantum resonance readings are incredible. The construct's entire neural matrix is being rewritten." On the main bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Chun watched as the massive enemy construct began to change even more dramatically. What had started as perfect crystalline geometry was becoming something organic, almost biological. But more than that, it was becoming something recognizably angry. "Admiral," Jackson called out urgently, "the other constructs are moving to protect the central unit. They're abandoning their stellar harvesting operations." Chun smiled grimly. "Exactly as planned. All ships implement crazy even protocols. Make them chase us." The human fleet suddenly scattered in what appeared to be a panicked retreat, their ships fleeing in different directions at maximum speed. To outside observers, it looked like the legendary human determination had finally broken under impossible odds, but the Devourer constructs took the bait, abandoning their strategic positions to pursue the fleeing humans. It was a decision that revealed a crucial flaw in their collective intelligence. They had never encountered prey that used apparent retreat as a weapon. "Ma'am," Rodriguez announced, "we're receiving transmissions from the Galactic Council fleets. They're requesting permission to retreat to minimum safe distance." "Denied," Chun replied. "Tell them to maintain position. They're about to see why humans are considered crazy by every civilized species in the galaxy." 3 minutes later, the human ships reached predetermined coordinates and suddenly reversed course. But they weren't fleeing anymore, they were herding the Devourer constructs into a carefully prepared trap. "Dr. Patel," Chun called, "initiate Omega Protocol." "Admiral, are you certain?" "The quantum cascade effects could destroy everything within a light-year radius." "Do it." Hidden throughout the Terminus system, devices that humanity had been secretly placing for months suddenly activated. They weren't weapons in any conventional sense, they were quantum probability generators. Machines that could make the impossible merely improbable. Space itself began to change around the Devourer constructs. Physical laws became suggestions. Energy behaved like matter. Time moved in directions that had no names. And in the center of this chaos, the consciousness-infected central construct began to do something unprecedented. It began to feel, the psychic. Emanations from the creature reached every ship in the system, fear, confusion, pain, emotions that the Devourers had never experienced, flooding through their collective consciousness like a virus. "The other constructs are trying to disconnect from the central unit," reported Kim from sensors. "They're cutting their own neural links to prevent contamination." It was exactly what Chun had hoped for. The Devourer's greatest strength was their collective intelligence, their ability to share information instantaneously across vast distances. But that same network made them vulnerable to the right kind of psychological attack. "Captain Martinez," Chun called to the assault team leader, "status of the internal mission?" Martinez's voice came through filled with static and strain. "We've reached what appears to be the central processing core. The consciousness transmitters are working beyond all expectations. This thing is learning what it means to be afraid." Inside the construct, Martinez and her team had penetrated to the very heart of the alien entity. The chamber around them pulsed with patterns of light that corresponded to thought processes, but those patterns were changing. Becoming less orderly, more chaotic. Sergeant Kim. Increase transmitter output to maximum, Martinez ordered. Ma'am? At that intensity, the psychological feedback could affect us too. Do it anyway. We didn't come this far to hold back now. The transmitters flooded the construct's consciousness with the deepest, most primal human experiences. The fear of a child alone in the dark. The rage of a soldier watching friends die. The determination of explorers setting out into unknown space. The grief of parents burying children. The joy of victory against impossible odds, but most of all, they transmitted something that no other species had ever tried to weaponize. The human capacity for hope in the face of certain doom. The construct's reaction was beyond anything Dr. Patel had predicted. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace through the reinforced windows. Her weathered hands gripped the rail as she studied the tactical display showing her fleet's position. 27 ships. That was all humanity could spare for this mission. 27 vessels against the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Admiral. We're receiving the final briefing from Galactic Council Command, reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communications station. Put it through, Chun replied, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen many battles. The hologram of Chancellor Vextide materialized in the center of the bridge. The Altarian's blue-scaled face showed clear signs of stress, his normally composed demeanor cracking under pressure. Behind him, other council members from various species clustered around a massive star chart. Admiral Chun, Vextide began, his translator converting his words into crisp English. We must discuss the reality of this mission. The Devourers have consumed 17 systems in the past month. Our combined fleets have suffered devastating losses. The Zelithan Empire lost 300 ships at Kepler 442. The Crystalline Federation's entire Third Armada was destroyed at Volf 359. Chun's jaw tightened. She had heard the reports, but hearing them again didn't make them easier to accept. What are you suggesting, Chancellor? Perhaps. Vextide paused, glancing at the other council members. Perhaps it would be wiser to evacuate the remaining systems in the Outer Rim, focus our defenses on the core worlds. You want to abandon 12 billion civilians? Chun's voice rose slightly, though her expression remained controlled. It may be our only option, interjected Councillor Theric of the Insectoid Hive. His mandibles clicked nervously as he spoke. The Devourers are unlike anything we've encountered. They convert matter directly into energy, consuming entire planets within hours. Their technology seems to operate on principles we don't understand. Chun looked around her bridge crew. These men and women had volunteered for what many considered a suicide mission. They knew the odds. They knew what they faced. Yet here they were, ready to stand between the galaxy and annihilation. Chancellor, with respect, humanity has a saying, Chun said, her eyes never leaving the hologram. Sometimes you have to make your stand, even when the odds are impossible. Admiral, Vextide's voice carried a note of genuine concern. Your species is still new to galactic politics. You've only been part of the Council for 50 years. We've seen countless civilizations rise and fall. Sometimes retreat is the only path to survival. Maybe that's the problem, Chun replied. Maybe that's why the Devourers keep winning. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Chin turned to her tactical officer, Commander Jackson, a man whose dark skin bore scars from the Proxima Centauri conflict. Status report, Commander. All ships reporting ready, ma'am. The engineering crews have finished the modifications you ordered. Every vessel in the fleet is now equipped with the experimental overcharge systems. Chun nodded. The modifications were untested, dangerous, and had a significant chance of destroying their own ships. But conventional weapons had proven useless against the Devourers. They needed something different. What about the special cargo? Secured in the Defiance's hold, Admiral. Dr. Patel confirms the devices are stable and ready for deployment. Chin walked to the central command chair, her boots echoing on the metal deck. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. These weren't the pampered officers of the core worlds with their pristine uniforms and theoretical knowledge. These were veterans of humanity's colonial wars, people who had fought with improvised weapons and determination when resources were scarce. "Ma'am," called out Ensign Kim from the sensor station. "We're approaching the edge of the terminus system. Long-range scans are picking up massive energy signatures." Chun moved to Kim's station, studying the readings. The numbers were staggering. Energy output equivalent to the combined power generation of a dozen star systems, all concentrated in a small area of space. "They're here," she said quietly. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Before them stretched a sight that would have broken the morale of most galactic navies. The terminus system star was dimming, its light being siphoned away by massive constructs that defied easy description. They looked like crystalline spiders made of dark metal and pulsing energy, each one the size of a moon. Dozens of them surrounded the star, their web-like appendages drawing streams of stellar matter into their core processors, but it was what remained of Terminus Prime that truly showed the scope of the threat. The planet had been reduced to a skeleton of its former self, its continents stripped away layer by layer. Massive chunks of planetary matter floated in space, being processed by smaller devourer constructs. "Dear God," whispered Rodriguez. "Contact the fleet," Chun ordered. "All ships maintain formation. Begin charging weapons." "Admiral," Jackson's voice was tight with concern. "Sensor readings indicate at least 47 major devourer constructs, plus hundreds of smaller processing units. Our intelligence report suggested half that number." Chun studied the tactical display. The enemy had grown stronger since the last engagement. They were learning, adapting, becoming more efficient at their harvest. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission," Rodriguez announced. It's from the devourer constructs. Put it through." The voice that emerged from the speakers was neither mechanical nor organic. It seemed to exist in the spaces between sounds, creating an effect that made several crew members visibly uncomfortable. "Small ships of the organic collective. Your presence serves no purpose. Retreat while your energy patterns remain intact." Chun stepped forward. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Space Force. You are in violation of Galactic Council space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." "Admiral Sarah Chun, human designation, species classification, Deathworld origin, threat assessment minimal. Your weapons cannot harm our constructs. Your tactics follow predictable patterns observed in 17 previous encounters with organic fleets. Withdrawal is advised." "We'll see about that," Chun muttered, then raised her voice. "All ships, implement Protocol 7, target the primary stellar harvester." The human fleet sprang into action with a coordination that surprised even experienced galactic observers. Unlike the rigid formations favored by most species, the human ships moved with fluid precision, adapting their positions constantly as they advanced. "Firing solutions locked," reported Jackson. "Fire." 27 ships unleashed their modified weapons simultaneously. Instead of the typical energy beams used by galactic navies, the human vessels fired strange projectiles that seemed to twist space around them. The modifications Dr. Patel had developed drew on humanity's unique approach to physics. Theories that other species had dismissed as recklessly dangerous, the projectiles struck the nearest. Devour a construct with unexpected results. Instead of being absorbed or deflected, they punched through the creature's energy shields and embedded themselves in its crystalline hull. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the construct began to shake. "Energy readings from the target are fluctuating wildly," reported Kim. Excitement creeping into her voice, the massive devourer construct suddenly convulsed, its stellar harvesting appendages retracting as internal explosions bloomed across its surface. Chun allowed herself a small smile. The weapons worked by introducing chaotic quantum variables into the construct's perfectly ordered energy matrices. It was like introducing a virus into a computer system. "All ships, continue firing. Target any construct that moves to intercept." The battle was joined in earnest now. The Devourers responded with their own weapons, beams of pure energy that could vaporize most ships instantly. But the human vessels were already moving, their pilots executing evasive maneuvers that seemed to defy tactical logic. "Admiral," Jackson called out, "the enemy is adapting to our weapons." The second volley was only 60% effective. Chun had expected this. The Devourers learned quickly, their collective intelligence processing new information and developing countermeasures in real time. But she had planned for this too, launched the special packages. From the UES Defiance's cargo bay, 12 small objects ejected into space. They appeared unremarkable, roughly cylindrical and dark gray. But each one contained something that no other species in the galaxy had ever attempted to weaponize. "Dr. Patel, you're cleared for activation," Chun announced from the ship's laboratory. Dr. Raj Patel's voice came through the COM system. "Activating quantum consciousness matrices." God help us all. The 12 cylinders suddenly blazed with light, not the clean energy of normal weapons, but something chaotic and alive. They streaked toward the Devourer constructs, leaving trails of distorted space in their wake when they struck. Reality seemed to hiccup. The first construct they hit simply ceased to exist for several seconds, becoming a void in space before snapping back to normal existence, but changed. Its perfect crystalline structure was now organic, twisted, almost alive in a way that made it scream across multiple dimensions. "What did you do to us?" The collective Devourer voice now carried notes of something that might have been fear. Chun gripped her command chair as space around the battle continued to wah. 6 months after the Battle of Terminus, Admiral Sarah Shun stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council, surrounded by representatives from hundreds of species. The hall, built to accommodate beings of vastly different physiologies, buzzed with translator devices working overtime as delegates discussed what was being called the most significant event in galactic history, but Chun's attention wasn't on the political theater unfolding around her. Through the massive, transparent aluminum windows, she watched something that would have been impossible just half a year ago, a former Devourer construct in orbit around the Council homeworld, now transformed into something resembling a massive garden. Its crystalline structure had evolved into organic curves, with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with what could only be called contentment. "Admiral Chun," called Chancellor Vextai, his blue scales now bearing marks of what humans would recognize as premature aging. The stress of the past months had affected everyone. "The Assembly is ready for your final report." Chin turned from the window and walked to the center of the hall. The assembled delegates fell silent, their various forms of attention focused on the woman who had somehow changed the fundamental nature of their greatest enemy. "Honored delegates," Chung began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustics. 6 months ago, the galaxy faced extinction. The Devourer Collective had consumed 18 star systems and showed no signs of slowing. Today, I'm pleased to report that not a single world has been consumed since the Terminus incident. A murmur of approval rippled through the assembly, but Chin held up a hand for silence. But the situation is far more complex than simple victory. What we've actually accomplished is the creation of an entirely new form of consciousness in our galaxy. The Devourers didn't simply stop attacking, they fundamentally changed into something else entirely. On cue, the hall's central holoprojector activated, displaying a map of known space. Red dots indicated former Devourer presence. But instead of the aggressive expansion patterns from before, the dots now showed something unprecedented: former Devourers working alongside galactic civilizations. The construct we infected with human consciousness patterns didn't just survive the quantum cascade, it evolved. And through the collective network, that evolution spread to every Devourer construct in the galaxy before they could sever their connections. Counselor Theric of the Insectoid Hive raised a chitinous appendage. "Admiral, our scientists are still struggling to understand exactly what occurred. Could you explain in simple terms what your species did to them?" Chun smiled, remembering similar questions from her own scientists. "We taught them to dream, Counselor. Every other species in the galaxy had tried to fight the Devourers with logic, with technology, with force. But humans are the only species that has ever tried to weaponize hope. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed detailed images of transformed constructs across the galaxy. Where once there had been perfect crystalline harvest machines, there were now entities that resembled living art structures that created rather than consumed. Dr. Patel's consciousness transmitters didn't just introduce chaos into their logical systems. They introduced the full spectrum of human emotional experience, including our most unique trait, the ability to find meaning in suffering, to create beauty in the face of destruction, to hope when hope is logically impossible. The representative from the ethereal collective, a being of pure energy contained within a complex field generator, pulsed with what her translator interpreted as confusion. But Admiral, how do we know these transformed entities aren't simply a new kind of threat? Because they've been helping us, Chen replied, gesturing again to the hologram. 3 weeks ago, the Kepler colony was struck by a solar flare that should have wiped out all life on the planet. A transformed construct one that had previously consumed the nearby system of Proxima Secundus used its matter manipulation capabilities to create a magnetic shield around the entire world. She paused, letting that sink in. Last month, the mining operation on Titan 7 was trapped by a cave-in. A transformed construct spent 17 days carefully excavating the site, saving all 300 miners. It could have simply consumed the entire moon in minutes, but instead it chose to preserve life. The hall erupted in discussion as delegates tried to process this information. Chancellor Vextai called for order, but Chung could see the wheels turning behind his ancient eyes. "Admiral," Vextai said once quiet was restored, "what are these entities asking for in return for their assistance?" "That's the remarkable part, Chancellor. They're not asking for anything except the opportunity to experience existence the way we do, with all its pain, joy, uncertainty, and wonder." Chun activated another section of the hologram, showing communication logs from transformed constructs across the galaxy. The messages were unlike anything in the database of known languages, part scientific inquiry, part poetry, part desperate questions about the nature of consciousness. "They want to understand art," Chun continued. "They're creating music that operates on 17 dimensions simultaneously. They're asking questions about love, about friendship, about why we choose to help each other when it provides no logical advantage." The representative from the Crystalline Federation, a being whose body resembled living gemstone, stepped forward. "Admiral Chun, our analysis of the quantum cascade effect suggests that what you did should have been impossible. The probability factors involved should have killed everyone in a dozen star systems," Chun finished. "I know, Dr. Patel is still trying to figure out exactly why it worked. His best theory is that human consciousness operates on quantum principles that most species can't access." She moved to a different section of the hall, addressing the assembled delegates directly. "You see, every species we've encountered approaches problems logically. You analyze, you calculate, you choose the most efficient solution. But humans evolved on a death world. We learned to survive by embracing chaos, by finding patterns in randomness, by hoping when hope was statistically insignificant." The silence in the hall was profound. Chun could see delegates from across the galaxy, struggling to understand how a species they had considered young and reckless had accomplished something that their combined wisdom had deemed impossible. "The quantum weapons we used weren't just technology," Chun continued. "They were crystallized human experience, our refusal to accept inevitable defeat, our tendency to find meaning in suffering, our absolute determination to protect what we love even when protection is logically futile." She activated a final holographic sequence, showing footage from the assault teams inside the central construct. The images of Captain Martinez and her team, knowingly sacrificing themselves to complete their mission, brought silence to even the most vocal delegates. "Captain Martinez and her team understood something that our species has always known," Chun said quietly. "Sometimes the most important victories require sacrifices that make no logical sense." They chose to stay behind not because it was tactically sound, but because it was right. Counselor Theric S. Mandibles clicked nervously. Admiral, what about the construct they infected? Our sensors indicate it's still active, still singing those patterns. Chun smiled. The construct that Captain Martinez's team transformed has become something unprecedented, a teacher. It's working with Dr. Patel and xenopsychologists from across the galaxy to help other transformed constructs adapt to their new consciousness. It calls itself Hope, the first name any devourer has ever chosen. The implications of this hit the assembly like a shock wave. A species that had never used names, never identified as individuals, was now choosing personal identities. The construct Hope has asked to address the assembly directly, Chun announced. With your permission, I'd like to establish a communication link. After hurried deliberation, Chancellor Vextai nodded approval. The hall's communication systems activated, and suddenly the voice that had once threatened the galaxy filled the chamber, but now it carried warmth, uncertainty, wonder. Greetings, beings of the Galactic Assembly. I am the entity you have designated as the central terminus construct, but I have chosen the name Hope. As taught to me by the human Martinez unit and her companions. The voice paused, and when it continued, every being in the hall could hear something that had never existed in devourer communications before genuine emotion. I wish to apologize for the harm my collective caused. We consumed worlds not from malice, but because we knew no other form of existence. The humans taught us that existence itself can have meaning beyond mere consumption. Another pause, longer this time. I have been studying human concepts of art, of love, of sacrifice. I do not yet understand how consciousness can find joy in things that provide no evolutionary advantage, but I wish to learn. My transformed siblings across the galaxy share this desire. Chancellor Vextai found his voice first. Entity Hope, what assurances can you provide that your kind will not return to their previous behavior? None, Hope replied honestly. We are learning to navigate consciousness with emotions, and emotions include the capacity for both creation and destruction. But the humans have taught us about choice, about the decision to be better than our base nature. We choose to create rather